Okay, so I come from a Caribbean background. My family are from Jamaica originally. Well, my parents are part of the Windrush generation. So with all of that, I grew up in a kind of a confused household. I went to a Church of England school. So as part of that, I had to go to a Church of England school. But my parents, well, my mother was a Seven-day Adventist. So if anyone doesn't know about Seven-day Adventists, they worship on a Saturday. They keep the Sabbath sunset to sunset. So they follow pretty much the Old Testament, with, not eating pork, shellfish, all of those kinds of things. So I went to church on a Saturday and on a Sunday. Just to make my life a little bit more confusing. So until I kind of stopped going to church full time when I was about 16, but was still very much involved. I didn't get baptized in the church, but it was a major part of my life, keeping the Sabbath and all of those kinds of things and going to church on a regular basis. But it was pretty much from the perspective that, when your mother says, get up and go to church, you get up, put your hat on and go to church. So I think I've always been questioning, but I think it's not until you're an adult that you have the power to really question properly and reevaluate. So as I got older, and I was a believer for very much I was a believer that there was something, and that God was, because you're coming from a Caribbean background, God is a fact and the Bible is a history book.
Mm.
So you kind of have this idea, even though you're questioning what you're questioning is, well, where is God? Do you still have the belief that he's there and that, you know what I mean? But you're questioning what is he supposed to be doing and things like that. But the belief in him is very much real. You believe that, you pray because you feel that those prayers are going to be answered. You pray for other people because you want good for them and all of those things. So
Mm.
those were all part of my life until I was, pretty much in my late 20s, I think, when I started to kind of really go, actually, I'm not doing this anymore. So that's when the change come. But I didn't join Association of Black Humanists till about 12 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, something like that. I'm not a founding member, but I am part of it from very early on.
Thank you so much. So I did want to, again, you kind of led me on to that quite nicely. Why Black humans at all? What's the purpose of its existence?
It's a really interesting question. We live in Europe, and Europe has become, if not secular, very accepting of religion and non-religion. So there
Mm.
isn't the urgency to be religious or non-religious. There is, it is a real choice that you can decide whether you want to be a believer or not. When you come from cultures that is not the case. So the members of ABH come from an African background. So they're Nigerian, they're Ghanaian, and they're from the Caribbean. And and the two main religions are Islam and Christianity. But
Mm.
in those communities, religion is fundamental, it is foundational. And so that choice that you have, even though you're in Europe, is lessened because of the community that you come from. So if you want to extricate yourself from that, it's harder. And where do you go? When if you're Nigerian and you have to be, either a Muslim or a Christian, you have to be those things because it's not just, for me, it was my family, but, some of them went to church, some of them were just believers. Whereas you come from some communities, you get up, you go to church. And if you're not doing that, you are, you're an outcast. You're losing not just a religion, but you're losing family, you're losing friends. It can affect your work, it can affect a whole load of things, and we don't think about that in the UK, and especially when you're looking at the wider community, those people who are not from from the African communities, from the Caribbean communities, they don't understand what that means to not be a part of your community, to be, away from your family, from your friends, to have your family and friends, shun you and all of those kinds of things. So what we do at ABH is we give that understanding, just to say, yes, we get it. And sometimes that's what you need, just to say, yes, we get it. We know where you're coming from. Conservatism, if we look at what's going on in the world today, conservatism is king. And so when we're looking at communities that are struggling with that, who are saying, actually, I'm questioning this, and even to ask the wrong questions can be quite, can have a quite negative effect on your life and how you interact with everybody around you. So that's what we do. We provide a space where people can come together. We talk about humanism in the wider sense, so assisted dying and all of those things, but we talk about humanism and non-belief in the African sense, in the Caribbean sense, in the diasporic sense of what that means to our communities and how it affects us. And then just providing a space where we can just go, look, you know what I mean? We get it, and think about how we can support. And we don't offer any kind of practical support, so we don't have counseling or things like that, but just a space where people can come and just be themselves is really important, because it affects your well-being. If you're having to be someone else Mondays and Tuesdays and go to church on a Sunday, but that's not where your head is. But because you live at home, because you work for the family, or those kinds of things, leaving isn't just, as an option as you might think it would be.
Yeah, I did actually want to ask, didn't write this down, but I'm going to ask it. Obviously, we're talking of, in, countries such as, in African, in actually African countries or Caribbean countries. I mean, we know for a fact, based on, I might actually speak to humans in Kenya, by the way. That's a whole different story. We know it can be quite difficult for them to come out as atheists, but is that also happening in the Black British community, so the ones who are born and raised here? Is the same conservative challenges the same, even though you live in a wider society which is, largely secular or pretty accepting? Do the exact same challenges exist in these kind of microcosm communities, in your case of black communities, but
Absolutely.
black British communities, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely they do. So we have members. I'll give you an example so that you can be clear. As I say, if you're young, if you're living at home, you don't have the power. So we had a member that would, text us from, we had a WhatsApp group, and they would text us from while they were at church on Sunday, because they lived at home. When they tried to do anything that was remotely non-conservative, so they wanted to go to Pride and march, not because they weren't LGBT themselves, but they wanted to show that support. They had family members, pastor, rubbing them in oils, you're not going, you're obviously possessed by the devil, all of those kinds of things. So, and, even not as extreme as that, just the kind of idea of not being part of the church, you lose everything. So you can get kicked out of your home. You've had homelessness as well. You get kicked out of your home. And if you're on, if you're at uni, uni has been a space where people can kind of leave, they go as far away from family. But if you're young and you haven't got that space to go, what do you do if you're family? And we've had families, because when you're in the UK, what tends to happen with communities who are not from the UK is that they come together, they rely on each other, so that community becomes even smaller, so that family and friends are all from the same community, and they're all going to the same church. So if you're not there, that community is asking questions. So yes, it absolutely happens here. And it is a case of, having to leave your family in some cases, and they will cut you off. And, and it can be, if you haven't got the financial means to do, to set up on your own and be your own person, you are then in a position where you have to stay in a family, go to church, and play that role. And that can be quite distressing.
And have the Association of Black Communities, have you had interactions with the Humans UK organization? Are you part of them? Do you talk to them?
We're
Or
not part
are
of
you
a, yeah, we're not part of Humanist UK. I think it was really important for us as Association of Black Humanists to be autonomous, because the issues that Humanist UK need to discuss may not be the ones that we want to discuss. We've got to, and I think sometimes what people don't recognize is that Black people, and I use that in sort of Labour Party sense. When we talk about Blackness, we talk about any melanated person who is in religion. So we have, people from the Arab communities, people from around the world who come to us because there's that space. But we've got a history of colonialism. We have a history of all of that exploitation. And that can be quite triggering, because we're always going into spaces where our voice is minimized, because our experiences are not the same as the wider community. So if we're going into a space where I've highlighted as a special problem, as a special issue, or the voice is minimized because it doesn't affect the wider community. So I think it's important that we as ABH stay as a humanist organization for the diaspora, but also we do interact with Humanist UK, and Andrew Copson and ABH have had numerous conversations. We go to their events. We do get invites. We are part of, not part of, but some of our members are part of Central London Humanist. There are other smaller local humanist groups around, and our members are part of those things, because we are a humanist group, and we look at what humanism is, and we feel that we're a part of that. But I think there are additional views, interests that we as Black humanists are going through that the wider community isn't part of. They understand, but I think it's important that we recognize ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect answer. Thank you. Yeah, I did kind of, again, you kind of preempted it again. Why, yeah, how do I articulate it? So from my own research, right, what I've found is that humanists tend to, obviously a majority white and majority white country, but it is disproportionate, right? And I also find there's also an article, this is about British Asians, but I imagine saying Black British people, and this is what I'm going to ask you, that they tend to be more socially conservative in the white British population. And where religion is declining in the UK, we're really talking about, to me, the white British population, whereas everybody else, we're kind of not changing. Individuals like me and you, notwithstanding, it's not really changing. So do you have any theories as to why that is? And do you have any specific insights into the Black British community? Do you have, well, I don't know if you do have it, but it'd be great if you did. Do you have any stats or anything like that? Do you know how many Black humanists there even are? And what is the state of in Black British groups, non-religion? It's a bit of a long-winded question, but you get the idea.
No, it's an important question. I think when we're looking at humanism, I think there are two problems, or two things that we need to consider. Humanism as a thing, as something that we talk about as a label, isn't really well known. So when we look at the wider population, I think it's 56%, 59% or something like that of the British population don't see themselves as religious. But that doesn't equate to them seeing themselves as humanists.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a sort of labeling issue, or an issue of how people see themselves and what they think. People don't know humanism. What does it mean? If I say I'm a humanist, what does that actually mean? How does that change my life? And I think in this context, when we're looking at the European context, why do I need that label when I can just live my life as a non-religious person? So there are loads of people out there. I mean, if we look at humanism, the groups that it doesn't include are working class people. So you will rarely see a working class anybody saying that they're a humanist. They say that they don't believe in all of that or whatever, but they don't class themselves as a humanist. And so I think there's an issue with humanism and the messaging of humanism. And I think that is about who is used within humanism. So we've got people like Stephen Fry, Sandy Toksvig, and I have no issues with those, with those people as individuals and what they stand for and all of those things. And that isn't my point. My point is that it then becomes elitist, or it focuses on a particular demographic of people. And that usually is the white middle class kind of groups of people. So I think there's a messaging issue in general with humanism. Then when you move that to the idea of a conservative Black, whether Caribbean, whether, African, from wherever that is, you're coming from what Britain was, couple of 100 years ago, whatever, where it's conservative, where it's everybody has to be doing the same thing. It's conformity and it's conservative. So therefore, how do we then move into a non-belief, whether we label ourselves as humanist or not? How do we move into that state of non-belief? So if we look at what's happened in Nigeria, Mubarak Bala has just been released after being in prison for nearly 5 years for just saying things that people decided were blasphemous. And blasphemy in the UK isn't a thing, but in other countries it is a thing. So that doesn't disappear at the border. When you land at Heathrow, people don't suddenly kind of go, you can't you can't blaspheme. Within your community, you can blaspheme. And so all of those things don't just stop because you're in the UK. And so the idea of just saying that you don't believe is harder. So there probably are loads of Black humanists, much more than we have. We've tried, trust me, we've tried to reach out. But who's going to say that they are a non-believer? Even if they are, people in the public eye. We've approached people and very few people have said, oh, we don't believe, because the community will go, what do you mean you don't believe? It's a really big thing to say that you don't believe. And so people don't. They stay neutral. So it's really hard to try and find where they are. They're not going to say anything. And then if they're going to say that they're a humanist, what is humanism? The messaging on that, as I said, isn't very good. So where are they going to go? So they might as well just stay quiet and live their life in peace. And that's what the struggle is.
Well, I will also add to that. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to include this because kind of my voice here, but I just want to have a bit of a conversation, maybe just have a bit of a conversation here in the middle of the interview.
Absolutely, I'm willing
but
to chat.
I also think I've got a bit of a theory in terms of, and you alluded to it earlier when we were talking about colonialism and things like that. To me, what I think, so it's all of what you said, plus this. To me, it's also the fact of basic identity. So it's the problem of this idea of non-religion. Oh, that's what white Europeans do. That's not our culture,
Absolutely.
and we can't do that because look at what they did to us, type thing. How can you believe in that? Look at what they did to us. We should, you're, betraying, or coconut. I love that one. Coconut. It's like such a silly thing. I
Yes.
hate that one, but but it's real. I mean, I've not personally called that, but I've met people who have told me they've been called, which is quite, it's quite terrible, really. I mean, we laugh, but it is bad. But I think that's another big factor here is the legacy of colonialism, sorry, racism as well. It also leads people to think, oh, I can't believe that because then I'm betraying my people, then I'm,
Absolutely.
yeah. So and again, that goes back to why I think we need more representation, because if you get the idea, well, hold on a minute. No, by the way, atheism doesn't belong to anybody, and it kind of shatters all those illusions. But anyway, that's just another thing because
No, I mean, you raise a really
yeah,
good point, and I think that's one of the reasons why we stay autonomous, because of it.
yeah,
But even, when we think about the Christian religion, how African is that? How,
yeah,
and even if we've got Africans who are, who are Muslims, how African is that? How, do you know what I
yeah,
mean? So even though you've taken on these other religions that aren't from your culture, that actually denigrate and dismiss your culture, but you still take it on, but then still question if you,
mm,
the humanist side of things. And this is all the kind of cognitive dissonance we have and the kind
Yeah.
of the kind of problems that we have in the community with this confusion and that Black people have to come up against, and also the demonization of humanism, because religion, regardless of where, religion has deemed itself to be good. So if you're not
Mm.
part of that, you're
Yeah.
automatically a bad human being. And no one wants to be labeled bad. No one wants to be labeled any of those things, because once you get those labels, others can then treat you however they see fit. And so, it spirals into kind of negativity.
Yeah. Um, yeah, okay. Well, this is a very specific question. You sorry, you used to be London Black human atheist, sorry, London Black atheist, and you mentioned Central London humans. So can you tell me? I mean, do you do things around the country, or is it pretty much London based?
Yeah, we are London based because that's where, I mean, just to explain, Association of Black Humanists run by three people. So me, Audrey Simmons, and then there's Lola Tanubu, and there's Clive Arude. And so the three of us are based in London. So it's only based in London, or we do things based in London because that's where we are. We run it voluntarily. I mean, we've just become a charity, but we run it by ourselves. We don't have any funding, so it makes it really difficult. We do try and do things in other places and with other people. So we did an event in Hastings in the summer, but it's difficult to try and travel around when all of us are working full time, and this is just a passion for us. It's just, so we do things as and when we can. And so that means that we are focused in London, but not for any other reason other than that's just where we happen to be. And if people want us to go to other places, we'd be happy to do that if we've got the time and, the resources to do it.
Yeah. So I kind of jumped ahead there, my bad. But anyway, so how can people find you? I'm assuming you're online. Got a contact, do you?
We are mostly, our events are publicized on Meetup and Eventbrite. So we need to think that we are doing, that's where we publish it. We don't have a specific building. We're homeless at the moment. So we usually try and meet up. We used to meet up once a month. We are still looking for a home. Um, so we do events. So sometimes we do joint events. So we've done quite a bit with Central London Humanists. So Humanists Now is run by Central London Humanists. It's their particular podcast. So that's why we're on there. We do work with them quite closely. And some of the other humanist groups will call us to do some bits and pieces. And so we used to be on Twitter X. We're kind of withdrawing from that now, so you probably won't see us. We haven't put anything out on there simply because of the political climate that's going on at the moment. We do some TikTok stuff. You might have seen my face on TikTok. So I do some TikTok stuff, and Lola does some TikTok stuff. And I think we've got an Instagram account, so we put things out on there. So because it's just the three of us, and it's mostly Lola and myself that are doing stuff, because it's just the three of us. So we kind of grab things as we can. We were trying to do some stuff regularly. So there'll be some bits and pieces floating around that you might be able to sort of look in. I don't know if you saw our TikTok stuff.
No, I haven't actually. That's actually news to me. I'll look it up after this.
Yeah, so
I'm
there's,
actually
and that,
pleased to hear that.
yeah, so we try and get that, but we're not sort of media savvy. It's just, we're of that age. I'm more, but we try and do stuff to try and get our names out there. As I say, we had a website, but there was no reason for us to really have a web, because it would just be a page. And we try to meet up. Our meetups are really where people can find us. So we're on meetup.com, Association of Black Humanists, and anything that we're doing, that's where we put it out. Most of our meetups are free. We ask for donations. If we're doing a big event where we've had to pay somebody to come, then we may charge for that. But so that's what we're doing. We are trying to give our name out there to say that actually you can be Black and be a non-believer. You can be Black and be a humanist. So that's the message that we try and put out in different ways.
Have you had much success?
Success, I don't know what we deem as success. We're still here. It's been at the moment, it's quiet because we don't have a home. When we're able to meet regularly and we've got a
Mm.
space, then we can put on events and get people to come along. Because our last because our last place, they closed it. We've had two places close on us. So then we have to sort of do the whole process of trying to find somewhere that we can be. So um, that means that people who are coming to us regularly kind of they lose us because we don't have anywhere to go. So sometimes we get, really good events that are really popular. And we try and team up with other organizations as well to kind of, because we want to do the humanist thing, but I think we also have to recognize that we are Black people living in Europe. We are Black people in, out of context. And so we try to look at not just racism. We're more than just being, facing racism, but the issues that we deal with. So we talked about the assisted dying. We did a talk on that, assisted dying from the perspective of Black people, giving blood, all of those kinds of things. Why does the Black community struggle with those kinds of things? So again, these are general issues, but from the Black perspective. And so
Yes.
those are the kinds of things. That's how we try to tackle it.
And also, obviously, with humanism, if you don't mind.
Well, I suppose when we look at religion, when my parents came over, so we're looking at my parents, particular parents came over in the 60s, but we're looking at, after the war.
Mm.
Coming from Jamaica, which is still is a very, very Christian oriented,
Mm.
although people may not believe it, but it's a very Christian place. Coming
Mm.
over, what they were looking for religion. They came back, they went to those, the local church and were poorly treated by those church members. So this left them with the idea of, well, how do we worship? So that's why we have what we now call the Black church. So those church people had to then find their own way of worshiping. So again, communities came together, they found spaces, started off in people's homes, and then gradually, and we can see that with the African community now. So when you look at the Nigerian, mostly Nigerian, but other, when we're looking at, it starts off in someone's home and then somebody sets up a church and hires a space over a hairdresser's or a nail shop, and then as it gets bigger and bigger, they find bigger spaces. And so now when you look at, I live in Southeast London, the Old Kent Road, on a Sunday all the nail shops close and they become churches. And so that's pretty much the story of when coming over, wanting to just be thinking, we've come to the motherland, we're going to go to the local, St. John's Church, and being badly treated, told not to come back, and all of those kinds of things. And those stories are out there for everyone to Google and read. So, and what that does, and I think what that did is then force communities to then be insular, to kind of rely on themselves, not being able to get money to buy houses. They then had to do the partner, which is a kind of insurance thing. So
Mm.
you've then forced communities to be more independent and reliant on themselves. And that's, so then within that community, you've got the idea of racism. And so that becomes part of the community. So everything that's, they do has racism attached to it. And even now, it's really interesting when people think that racism has gone, or they know they're tired of it, because it doesn't actually disappear, because the whole system is built, to kind of push people out. It isn't built for
Mm.
Black people. It's built for themselves. So you are, because of its history, their
Yeah.
interaction with their colonial, so even the French colonial and the Spanish, they've all managed to have the same hymn book in terms of how they treat those people from the Caribbean, and those, their colonial history. They all have the same playbook. So if you look at how slavery has infiltrated and has been played out within the Caribbean, within South America, wherever, and in North America, the playbook is the same. The British kind of laid the foundations, but the Spanish and the French kind of took it on as well. So they've all got this, they all borrowed from each other. So it's
Well,
pretty much, yeah.
I suppose I just mean, sorry to interrupt you. I suppose I just mean in terms of, we'll just go back to humanism. I mean, I
Mm.
would imagine it'd be quite difficult to find many I imagine you're quite unique, right, in being a Windrush generation humanist because you've got all the factors kind of in one. Jamaica being a very socially conservative Christian Protestant country,
Mm.
and all what we said before about the colonialism and racism and identity. It's kind of like a perfect storm for like anti-humanism, if you like. So
It is.
yeah,
And I think when we look
yeah,
at the history, humanist religion was one of
mm,
so when we look at the religion of the plantation owners, they were, Protestant, they were C of E or Catholic. So
mm,
those, the major religion, but the smaller non-conformist religions, Quakers, Moravians, all of those kind of smaller religions were actually pro-African. So they set up schools. So after slavery, the Quakers would buy, when we talk about the Underground Railroad and all of those kinds of things that were going on, Quakers were really part of that. They were the white people
mm,
that were able to take people to those places and put them up in their homes. And the Moravians and I'm trying to think, and the Baptists, my family in Jamaica were
mm.
Baptists, they were hugely part of that. So religion was embedded within when they set up the communities. So that's why they're so conservative, because it actually saved them. It actually was a positive thing during and after slavery.
Being a humanist later in life. Can you tell me about what drew you to humanism in the first place? What's kind of your kind of inflection point, if you
I
like?
suppose I'm like everyone else. I don't think I was drawn to humanism. I was drawn to the idea of being a non-believer,
Mm,
and how does that play out in my life? And I kind of didn't know anything about humanism per se. And the way that I met Clive and Lola, there used to be a program on called The Big Question. And I was
yeah.
in the audience, and so was Clive and Lola. And Clive stood up and said he was from the London Black Atheists at the time. And when you hear something and it's just your label, that was who I was. And so I chased them down the hall. We were at Goldsmiths, chased them and said, this is where I need to be. And so it was through that idea I discovered humanism as it was. But I think what people don't realize is that humanism is what comes later, the idea of being a non believer, of being someone that wants to think for themselves and
Mm,
being someone who doesn't want to be part of a religious institution and the non-belief in a god or any of that. That's the start of humanism, but it's not the only thing. So once you've got those
mm,
bases, you can then think about, how do I then live my life? And humanism is about how you live the day to day as someone who doesn't believe in a god or doesn't follow a religion. So humanism is those foundational things about altruism, or how do I live with my neighbors, and how do I the American Association of Humanists, or the Humanist American Association of Human of can't remember how it is what the
mm,
term is, but they have got the 10 commitments. And I think it's anyone who's thinking about what does humanism mean, the 10 commitments is a good way of looking at the kind of things. So it's about looking at being a globalist, looking at the environment, looking at all of those things. And what is usually leveled at us is those things are what, religion actually, they are the foundations. And I always say those things are what people were doing first, and what religion has commandeered and taken over, and then repackaged them as something that only can come from religion. But they're human things. People have lived with
mm,
the land, they've been conscious of the environment for centuries. So the foundation is a non-belief and a realization that you want to live your life, and how you do that. And humanism then comes in. And so I found it later, but most people already have the foundations of being a humanist in the way that they live their life. They just don't know that label. And
mm.
that's the thing that needs to be sort of worked on. How do we get that label that says this is what humanism is? And without making it an institution. And I think that's one of the things. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. And I think that's what people struggle with, because people are used to rules and things like that. And there
Mm.
aren't rules within humanism, because we're dealing with people. We're not dealing with something, ethereal. We're dealing with people, and people are illogical and emotional. And although we talk about humanism being logical, we're dealing with people. So we
Mm,
have to be able to accommodate those emotions and being able to deal with those people on a one-to-one basis. And then we can restructure that to the community, to the wider world, and how we deal with all of those people in their different ways. And it will change. And I think this is the thing that religion doesn't quite, although religion changes, it pretends that it doesn't. But you have to change because
mm.
people change. So yeah, that's how I live
No,
as a humanist and how we can take it forward.
perfect answer. I think we're gonna pretty much wrap it. I've got my last question to ask everyone. But if you can just give me 30 more seconds, I just want to make sure I've not missed anything whilst I
That's
have you.
okay. Yeah.
Um, yeah, sorry about this, but it's a bit. Uh,
I think humanism, especially within the Black community, for
Hmm,
women, even though women are usually the foundation of all communities, whatever community you go to, women are the ones that are, but their voice is always quiet. It's always quiet. And
hmm,
even within humanism, as you say, it's mostly white men that are the prominent ones. And this just makes life harder because it makes it harder for women to then leave religion if that's where they're at, because they may not be the breadwinner, the family commitments, and how women are treated to how men are treated is quite different. So, as I say, there's probably lots of people out there who are at the very least questioning or believing and non-believing, but are struggling for all of those reasons. And I think the female voice is one that is missing from humanism as general, but probably more so within the African diaspora.
hmm. So, are there any particular challenges that you think that female humanists, sorry, face that male humanists would not face? You kind of already covered it now, I know, but
Yeah, I mean, it's just the freedom to, when you are, how women are viewed in most communities, whether that's in Europe or in Africa or in the diaspora, women are family, they are, you know what I mean, they've got children. So whereas a man and can pack up his stuff, leave a family, it's harder for women to do that. To you know what I mean? It's women packing up and leaving children. And even if it, because not just the idea of leaving their children, because as human beings, but also how they are treated. So the way that a man is treated, as long as he pays, child support or whatever, he can go off and it's not seen as such a negative thing. Whereas if a woman who leaves her children, and if she's shunned, if she, especially from the Islamic world, for a woman to leave her children, she's negatively impacted with that whole label that she gets as a woman
mm,
is much more negative, and how she's treated within her community, with the other communities. And even in Britain, women who leave their children, the stigma is much harder. So women have this double whammy that they have to deal with, being doubly forced to stay in situations even now that they probably don't want to be in, because they may not be the breadwinner, they may be the child, the one who's giving all the child, doing the childcare, and that negative response that the community and people around them will have because she's a woman.
mm,
So that impact means that I feel that there are much more women out there who are having to go along with, and if their partners are prominent within the church, you're always expected. I mean, we look at any leader, the woman is expected to be by their husband's side, whatever they're doing. I mean, we've only got to look at Melania. She doesn't want to be there. You can see she doesn't want to be second, first lady, but her husband's made this decision, and so she has to go along with it. And this is the kind of thing that happens within communities, regardless. But I think it's worse when you're in a conservative community. How do you leave
mm.
without being labelled as, a harlot?
Yeah.
History, we have to understand how the colonial system works.
mm,
So the colonial system. So my mother was born in 1920. I've got a tattooed here, 1927.
mm,
So the education that she had was a similar education to the one that was taking place in Britain.
mm,
So there was no Caribbean history. It was all British history. She could quote Shakespeare. She could quote Wordsworth, all of those things. She had
mm.
a British
Yeah,
education. And I think that's one of the foundations of colonialism is erase the local history and implant
yeah,
British colonial or the colonial history. So that then, and so that um, embeds the idea of the motherland.
mm,
So when, coming to Britain was a dream. They weren't just coming because they were looking for jobs. They were coming to Britain. This is the place that they had been taught about. They could, you know what I mean, in reading poetry, in reading everything they did was focused on Britain.
mm,
So, and even whenever they were, whatever they were doing locally, the teachers all had been taught the colonial education. So
mm.
when you came here, it wasn't just about the racism, it was the crushing disappointment
Yeah,
that the country that they had been taught was the country they should look up to, didn't regard them as anything important at all.
mm,
And I think when we look at the Sikh community, especially those who just fought in a war for them, and we
mm,
have to remember that Black people, Indian people, people from the colonies fought under all the different flags. They fought under the French flag, they fought under the British flag, they fought under the Dutch. So all of those colonial countries had Black people in their armies fighting for them. So this idea, and the French, you are not allowed to be anything but French. So when you talk to a person who's French speaking in the Caribbean, they regard themselves as French, not Guadeloupean or whatever, because France teaches you that as long as you're part of the front, you are French. So that they dismiss the African, they dismiss the idea that you're an African or anything like that, even while they are dismissing you as Black, even while they're being racist to you, they're telling you that you're French. But you're wrong, you're the wrong kind of French, but you're French. So there is this idea that what colonialism does is teach you to not just to respect the Queen is the head of your country and your whole systems are set up by colonialism, but when you come into contact with those very same people that you've been taught to idolize, they don't want you because you're not British. And even as we sit here now, we look at each other and there are people that will tell us we're not British. We're born here, we're raised here, we've done all of this stuff, but they will still look at us and say you don't
Well,
belong here.
this is what I was kind of wanted to explore, kind of a
Mm,
physical. So but that was all basically. I was kind of took the words out of my mouth, thoughts out of my mouth, and I actually read. That's what Carla said in his book. Because I read his book like a few years ago. He said
mm.
exactly
With
what he said when
natives,
they,
I've read natives as
yeah, yeah,
well.
when they came, they really believed, oh my God, we're here. Like they're going to love us, and we,
Exactly.
we wear the suits and whatever the women, British, whatever, and they were like, oh,
Yeah.
no, which was quite sad. But 'cause what I was wondering is,
Mm.
is all that gone now? The idea of like British patriotism, is that all just like shattered because of what happened, or do they still believe it? Like, doesn't matter what happened to us, we still love the Queen. We still, you know.
My mum still liked the Queen because you don't even though my mum came over in the 60s, she had bedpans, she was a nurse, bedpans thrown at her, she was called
Mm,
nigger, she was called wog, she was called all of those things. But I think, again, the Queen was something different. The Queen
yeah.
was, do you know what I mean? And there are still things that are embedded in that have been instilled in you, that
Mm,
Britain still was the best place to be. It was still the best place. Where else were you going to go?
mm,
Because, it was that you understood the language, you understood the culture, you understood everything. Where else were you going to go? So you're in this kind of mix up because you're being discriminated against. But my mum still, she didn't want to go back to Jamaica. She went back, she had a look. Jamaica wasn't, she got comfortable. She understood Britain. She was comfortable right here. And this is and one of the dilemmas. And the dilemma for me is I sit here now as a second generation. We've got third generations now that are still going through the same similar things that my parents were going through, but they don't have another place to go because they've disconnected from where their grandparents came from, and this country is still doing strange things. And when we've got the influence of America, although we look at what's happening there, we've got the influence of Brexit, we've got the influence of the Reform Party and all of that, and the
Mm.
ultra conservative. So this country isn't comfortable, but we don't have another place to go. So now you'll find that my generation and the next generations are looking to go to Africa, as we're thinking, well, where else can we go? So if you look at the conversations that are taking place now, it's we're going, they want to go. So if you look at Garveyism, I don't know if you know about Marcus Garvey, but he was a, so if you look at Garveyism was going back to Africa, those kinds of ideas are now being brought forward. And because we've had
Mm.
Ghana saying that anyone, from the diaspora can come and set up there. And I think I say that's going to fail because once the Americans get there, there's going to be carnage. But Africa is saying, look, come back. We'll welcome you.
Mm.
So people are looking, and we're doing it with rose tinted glasses because colonialism and slavery interrupted that connection. Our colonial minds are looking over, as ex slaves saying, this is where we need to go back to. This is going to be, we're going to connect with the real motherland. We're going to be, and it's not, we're too colonialized. We've got 400 years of history embedded in us. And when we go there, we're not going to, we don't understand African culture at all, wherever we're from, Nigeria, whatever. I did a DNA test and I'm so African. I've got about 3% European in me, but I'm not going to be able to go and live in, whatever particular country, Ghana or wherever, Gambia, all of these places. So we're in a particular situation where we're a bit good. We're going to be a bit lost because this country is becoming a little bit uncomfortable for us. Where else are we going to go? We're looking to Africa, and you may see an exodus of some kind of people going to Africa, but I don't see that as being a comfortable place. We're too Europeanized to go to
Well,
Africa.
but this is what I was. We're going on a massive tangent here, but I'm kind of just glad you said it. I mean, because I was looking into this. Yeah, you kind of basically said it all, but and I kind of that was really interesting to hear. Thank you for that, by the way. But I was thinking in terms of so from my point of view, because I'm third
Mm.
generation, right? I just think like, I'm from England. Forget it. I'm not going anywhere. Um, they can do what they want. I don't care. Like they can be racist. I don't even care. Like I'm from Britain. What are you going to do about it? Type thing. That's my mentality. Quite like Milton. Like no, we're here now. I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not identifying with anything else. And I just thought, I wondered if because obviously if you're a first generation, you'd be like, oh well, I'm just from whatever country. But I think the second, third, fourth is going to be it's quite a weird one, isn't it? It's quite a weird. It's like oh I don't know what to do. And then if you think of like the rise of like reform, that's just made it all worse because it's like, oh my God, like we thought we were, and then we've got this lunatic doing like
Absolutely.
whatever he's doing. Um, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, that was a massive tangent there. But anyway,
It was, sorry, and I'm just like you. I will talk about these things for to the
but
but
that's what I want
yeah.
to do for kind of my journey. I want to explore that, especially what I really want to explore. I've tried to, I've been hard. I really want to explore specifically the Sikhs. So because I've read a
Mm,
few things, because there was actually we're on a tangent here, but I've actually got a book in my house,
mm,
and this is kind of one of my favorite quotes ever. I can't remember. I don't know who it's. It might have just been the author of the book. I think he said. He said something like the Sikhs, be more English than the English, or be more British than the British. That's what we should do. So like, no matter what they do to us, we'd be more British than them. And then so the back of the book has got a Sikh guy in a turban, right? And he's from Scotland, and he's wearing a what's it called? A kilt.
yeah.
And it's like when you read through the book, it's almost like saying like that's our pride. Like doesn't matter what they do to us, we are more British than the British. If you come here, will be even more British than you. And I find that really interesting. Like, oh, that's quite an interesting mentality. Because if you think of the opposite to that would be kind of what you said, like, no, look what they've done to us. We need to
Mm.
decolonize the mind. But this book is almost saying like, you do you understand what I'm saying? So I kind of want to
Yeah,
explore that, and I just find it quite an interesting dynamic, and I think it's something to explore because I don't think I've not seen, like, notwithstanding people like a Carla, not just him, but he's just one example. Obviously, there's
yeah,
millions, but he just one. Um, we don't really, I don't really see it in Britain that often when people like even mention it. It's I'm quite frustrating because I'm reading all this stuff in America and I'm thinking, yeah, that's great, but like, well, we're not from America. We've got
exactly.
our own stuff
No,
going on.
absolutely.
So like even like the Windrush thing, I find that personally more interesting. So I'm like, oh, I can actually physically go to uh, Brixton. I can actually see it myself. Whereas in
Mm.
America, kind of, well, I've never been to America. So I kind of really want to do the British thing because, like, we've got our own story. And by we, I mean British people of
Yeah,
any ethnicity.
absolutely.
I don't mean, we've got our own thing here, whether it be the Windrush or the Sikhs or a lot of Muslims fought in the war as well. You know, I think British Chinese have been here for actually quite a long time. Not many people know that. They've actually been here for a lot longer. People are aware sometimes. Um,
And
I just
they
find
were
that all really
scraped off
interesting.
the streets. The internment that's going on now, the Britain did it
Mm.
here with the Chinese people, picked them up off the streets and sent them on a boat back to China after the war.
There you go. See, I didn't know that. That's what I'm saying. It's like I
Mm.
find it quite frustrating that I read so much about America. I mean, obviously, I understand. I get why. I'm kind of I'm seeing it always like, why, like
I
it
have the
happened here.
same problem. I had the
You know what
same
I
because
mean?
I
Like
read
it.
Professor Catherine Cameron's book
Mm,
and I was, it's like, yeah, whatever, because we know that story.
mm,
And I mean, I find them all they're all fascinating, but you're right. I'm just trying to think what I've got here. I haven't got anything on Sikhism. I've got some. When I did my university degree, I did mine in Caribbean studies. So I've got
mm,
bits of pieces about Indians, the sort of the indentureship into the
mm,
Caribbean and things like that. But I don't remember it being Sikhs. It was mostly Hindus. Hindus
mm,
were a huge part, and now Islam is big in the Caribbean. You see
mm,
actual, whereas it wasn't there before. Now you see full-blown Hindus. It's become not Hindus, full-blown Muslims
mm.
in
Yeah, I know.
all, and that's very strange. I have to
Is that
say,
is that
not
because
strange,
is that because of recent migration flows? Is that?
not recent migration. The idea, Islam. We've got the Nation of Islam,
Yeah,
and that brand of Islam is touted as being Islam for African people.
yeah, like Malcolm X, right?
Malcolm X, that side of things.
Mm,
So when you look at they're coming from that perspective
mm.
of Islam. So I mean, the Caribbean is mixed with all kinds of people. So there's white, there's Indians, and
Yeah, yeah.
everybody's there. Everybody's there. But Islam wasn't, it was like 0.00%
Mm.
of anyone. And now it's it's moved up a bit. I'm not quite sure of the percentage, but I don't think it's in double figures, but it's it's
So
it's it's still new.
is that like a newer thing in younger generation? Like we're going to reject
It's a
Christianity, we're
newer
going to
and younger generation.
we're going to embrace the Islamic, Black
Yeah,
Islamic, whatever,
that's
the
right. Yeah. Moving
did
away
it,
from the Christian side of things, moving away from Rastafari. Rastafari is still there, but that's from the Christian
but
perspective.
why are they rejecting Christianity so much?
Because again, it's this idea of colonialism. So they're moving
Uh,
into trying to find, and I think when you're out of context, is how I always put Black people
mm,
in this world. We're out of context. What we're looking for is to find our space. Where do we fit in? And
mm,
so this again, so when we've got the Nation of Islam, so we had Rastafarism, which was Christianity for the African diaspora, for
mm,
Black people. Now we kind of moved away from that because it's still seen as, Christianity, which is the
mm,
colonial master's religion.
mm,
And as I say, Islam, the Nation of Islam is touted as Islam for Black people. So it comes from
mm,
that perspective.
I mean,
Elijah
there's,
Muhammad and all of those.
but
So, but I
I'd
haven't known
argue
anything about Sikhs.
just,
That's
well, but this is where the Sikhs don't have that similarity in terms of we, I say we, I'm a humanist, and I think of myself as English, but we, if you like, we are luckier, I guess you could say, in the sense that, like, we know where Sikhism started, we know what happened, and the British didn't take it away from us. They actually let us be Sikh, unlike the, you know, Windrush, for example, well, not the Caribbeans. You
mm,
understand what I'm saying?
mm,
Whereas the Indians, they're like, oh, it's fine. They did spread Christianity to the sea. That didn't happen. I don't know why. Don't know why, but and then so the Sikhs can easily go back to Punjab and they can see
mm.
everything, and it's kind of you don't have a disconnect. The disconnect for me is, and where I kind of relate in a different ways, because I think, well, I'm not Sikh, I'm not from India, so now I just think myself as English. Now what do I do? And so that's why I prefer the kind of, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I prefer the kind of like I don't see it as like I see British Sikh history as more important to me than Indian history, if that makes any sense. So I
Yeah,
think
I do.
so I think that's my story, not what happened. Obviously, what happened in India matters, but I see it as no, I'm from Britain, so what happened here? And that's why I actually did a video on my YouTube about Southall. You're in London, imagine that I really want to look into what happened there because they actually had a stabbing in the 70s. See, I got stabbed, and they had like a anti-racist like a thing from that. That to me is more interesting than anything happened in India. So I'm like, oh, that's actually on my. I can actually, I can go there. That's not that far from where I live. You know what I mean? Whereas India's like 4,000, whatever. But no, I mean, but no, that is different though. So you won't see that with Indians because they didn't have that stripped away from them. They can just go back to, Hinduism's what I don't know how old Hinduism is, really old, and they can
Yes.
just go back. And Islam's a weird one actually because Islam spread from the Arab world, so it's not Indian, well, Pakistani, so it's not a Pakistani or Bangladeshi religion. But that's actually quite that's a different one. But Sikhism and Hinduism, I know they're from India, they're still in India. There's no kind of colonialism. It's like it's there's no fight to be had, if that makes any sense. They've still got that.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I was going to say that. I mean, that would actually be my biggest argument for humanism, though, right? Because I'd say to the Caribbeans or the Africans, right? The master's religion, if you like, the master was Christian, right? So surely just and Islam's from where's it from? Jerusalem, isn't it? Right? Is that where it started?
Well,
Jerusalem, is
they're
that
all
right?
Abrahamic, so they're all
Yeah,
stemming from that kind of Middle
yeah,
Eastern
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing. So they all stem
That's
from
from the
there.
Middle East. Christianity's from Europe. Humanism.
I'm
We got
right with you. I'll be quite, I mean, and I think what the message that we have is that humanism is before all of these religions.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
about being human and how we have interacted with each other
Yeah.
over those, over millennia before we had any idea of God. And the idea of the concept of a God is one that we've created for our
Mm.
own kind of needs. And that's why each God is different. And we've had what over 4,000, nearly 5,000 gods over time. So we create them because it gives us comfort and it answers some of the questions that we have as human beings. But that doesn't make them real because we created them and we created them for our own
But
needs. And so, yeah.
just to we've gone on a massive tangent here. I know. Sorry, my bad. I bet it's my fault. But so with the say with like the Caribbean, do they not have like ancient like African tribal religions that they remember, or is that
Yes.
just completely erased? For
No, it's not completely erased. So we have a thing called Hokamina,
okay,
and there's another one. I've got a book up there on those things. So Pocomine is the one that comes to my head at the moment, which is what it derives from Africa. It derives from, I think the problem you have when we're in the Caribbean is that they're
Mm,
made up of people from different tribes and different parts of Africa. So the bits that survived are minimal because
mm,
people had to come together and kind of work out how they were going to be together.
mm,
And so, but yeah, so there's Pocomania and there's another one. And some of the traditions. So we've got Nine Night, which is Irish. So on
mm,
the ninth night after someone dies, so we've got all these different influences. So we've got the Irish, and when you hear Jamaicans speak, they were the colonial masters. They employed the Irish to be the overseers. So we say things like tree. We have shubeen. We have those language, these words that come in from Irish. And so, but we've got
yes.
Picnic, which is an Ghana. I think it's a Ghanaian word. It's a calm word. Picnic meaning child. So there are words and the way that we phrase ourselves. So the idea of me, the possessive me, Minago, which is a Caribbean, I'm not going, me. That's the construction of African languages. So there are bits, legacies of things that are there, sprinkled in the
Mm.
way that things are done.
But I suppose I'm asking, why wouldn't they just try and embrace the original African, try and
Because
really
those
find out
things
what
you
that?
have to, those things were beaten out of us a long time ago.
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
pagan things. So the fact that Pocomania is still there, these things had to be done in secret. These things were on pain of
yeah,
death. And you have to remember that religion, the colonial religions were only given, allowed to be used by Africans when slavery was over. Again, it was a way to control. So those
yeah,
Baptists
yeah.
and all of those who were teaching Africans to read, they were, they were killed. It was illegal,
Mm.
all of these kinds of things. So being religious and not, anything that was, you were pagans, what were you going to be doing if you're Usan or any of the African gods, you were calling their name? You're dead. But see, this is
Mm.
your life you're talking about. So the fact that there are
Well,
remnants of that
mm.
is a
Well, I suppose,
testament.
and also similar thing would have happened to the indigenous, right? Of the Americas, in terms of they had their religions completely wiped out, and they were either killed or told you have to be a Christian. Um,
Yes, there was a lot of
so
that. And even but
mm,
you have to remember that the Caribbean was full of indigenous people too. So the
yeah,
Tainos and the Caribs, they were completely wiped out. So that
mm.
they no longer live within I think
Well,
Cuba has a few, and Venezuela and
I think
Guyana.
that's what fascinates me so much about how strong Christianity is in particularly the Americas, not just the Caribbean, but also you think of South America
Mm,
as well. Think of someone like Brazil, right? Very
mm,
Christian country. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's the country. The only reason you have that is because the Spanish or the Portuguese or the British and Caribbean
mm.
brought that there. So why are you so wedded to this? Don't you? Can't you see that's what? So, but I don't know. I mean, that's not me to say. That just as a complete outsider, that's my point of view. And I'm really. You think of like Rio de Janeiro, you have the big and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
thinking, why? It's
But
like
you have to remember
that's
how it was
logic.
put in there.
Mm,
It isn't it isn't just about it's if you read from Columbus to Castro, it's a book about how the slavery and all of that whole
mm,
period of time from when Columbus landed. Religion, if you weren't religious, it's death. Schools,
mm,
every single thing that you did had to be that because that was the only way that they can control you. So when the Moors were in Spain, they were Muslim.
mm,
When they be starting to become Christians, and that's why they kicked them out. They were like, actually, we don't want this
mm,
because the influence, because they couldn't control. So
mm,
when you're looking at the Americas, they're looking at we've come in. We're not just coming in to take your resources. We want your land. We want everything. We want your people. We want everything. And the only way we can do that is if we control every aspect of your life. So
yeah.
even after slavery had ended, religion became the foundation. So if you wanted to go to a good school, you went to the local Moravian. So they were big in Barbados. The Moravian, the Baptist churches, the Quakers, the Jesuits, all of those kinds of religions. They
mm,
ran your hospital, they ran your school, they did everything that you needed. You
mm,
went, they were like the social services of the world.
mm,
And if you, even whether you wanted to or not, that is where you had to go because
mm,
they controlled everything.
mm.
So it becomes part of your life. It becomes part of what you do.
But that's yeah.
Generationally, you don't, you can't, and you forget.
But that's where I think that's why I'd like to. Well, I don't know. I don't know how much I could do if it's not
But it's a
from.
question, and I think it's really good that you're asking those
But
questions.
I think it's that's the I suppose a pro-humanist argument, I guess. If you want to, not that humanism, we deliberately do not do this. Obviously, we don't convert
Mm.
people, but the argument I'd make, um, I'd say, look at what the Catholic Church did. Look at what they actually did to you. Look at how much they controlled you, how much they, like I said, threatened you with death, right? And does that not tell you that maybe they're not or what they, like you don't understand what I'm saying? And I think, and obviously, it's not just that. It's also when you think of things like I read what you said about homosexuality, right? So Jamaica, I think I read once that Jamaica is like the worst in the world. I think, in terms
It's
of
getting better, but it's not good.
yeah. Well, I just read it's just a stat saying like the most kind of dangerous country is country, and the biggest argument I say to that is really think about who taught you that, right? It's not you. There's nothing to do with your that's somebody's taught you that bigotry, right? And so when you're doing this to other people of who are other, Caribbeans, you're just doing what the Christians want you to do, right? Which is be a bigot. And it's like, no, don't do that because you're not you know what I'm saying? It's like I find it quite I think it's quite a I don't know how to say this. It's quite an odd situation where not odd, quite a sad situation where Christianity has such power that it can kind of manipulate a whole people into believing, oh, we must kill gay people, or, whatever. When it's not even from there. You're not even it's not from the Caribbean, it's not from the Africans. And on top of all of that, not just that, it was actually used to enslave you. It was used to control. And it's just like, oh my God, why are you doing that? But then like I understand when I say why, I mean that in a
Yeah,
I
no.
understand. I understand why, because it's not their fault. They've been indoctrinated. I'm not blaming them, but I'm saying, like, I just find it fascinating how socially conservative these places can be when, if they really think about it, like, so you have a kind of weird, what's the word? Like, split between, like, oh, like, say, like anti-slavery, right? Or like anti-colonialism. Oh, but we will kill gay people. It's like, no, it's the same thing. If you're anti-colonialism, anti-slavery, you'll be like, oh, why do we hate gay people? Because of colonialism and slavery. And I find it quite interesting, like they haven't quite worked that one out yet. You know what I mean? Like is as part of all of that. Oh yeah, maybe we should just leave them alone. Maybe we should have abortion. Maybe we should, all the terrible things. Maybe we shouldn't kill people for being atheists. Maybe maybe we shouldn't tell women they need to do this. You know what I mean? I just find it quite an interesting like dynamic where they can be so anti-colonialism, but then not make that jump that the next one's religion and the next one's the Catholic Church or whatever it may be. So yeah, but that was a massive ramble there. Thanks.
No, it was a fantastic conversation. Thank you. But you're trying to apply logic to an illogical situation. And it's frustrating because I hear you and we've
Mm,
had these conversations. And when you speak to religious people, if you take away religion from some communities, it's the
mm,
very foundation of who they are.
Yeah.
And even the craziness. I mean, if you've looked at some of the stuff that's going on in the African churches, and when we
Mm,
did a session on that, the richest pastors, the tithing's not even part of religion, but the tithing, we went, Clive Lotto and I went to what was an overnight prayer meeting.
mm,
We went there disguised as Christians, as you know, it
mm.
was in Africa. And the things that you were made to do, I had to slap some stranger. Sorry, I'm laughing because we had to slap the devil out of people. So, and you had to shake people. We had to shake the devil out of people. And I got into it. I was shaking it, and Lana said that she's going to kick me out, baby H, because it's just, and everyone's doing the same thing. And we were there, it was all night. So it went on.
Mm.
You got there at 8 o'clock and you were there till say 8 o'clock in the morning. And you had to do all kinds of things. And they did it in different languages, they were accommodating, and it was at Excel. So it was massive, huge, thousands and thousands of people. And you kind of sit there going, but this is crazy. You want me to slap a stranger? You want me to slap a stranger? You want me to shake a stranger to get the devil out of them? Am I the only one that thinks that's a crazy thing? No, because everybody was walking around
Mm.
going, "Ch- ch- 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 ch-"
Mm.
and you're like, I'm sorry, this is crazy.
Mm.
But to have a whole room, thousands of people
Mm.
doing all of this. And then they talk about things like if your mother, your grandmother, your stepsister wasn't a believer, you are tainted. So you have to give extra tithes to get rid of that. You know what I mean? They go back generations. If your grandmother wasn't, if your grand aunt wasn't, if you're
Is this an African church
in an
in
African church, it was an African
oh,
Pentecostal um, night of prayer
in London, is it?
in London, the London XL.
Mm.
So when you're in that, and it's a frenzied situation when you've
Mm.
got thousands of people together, all doing the same thing, all chanting the same thing, all singing, all, do you know what I mean? And it builds up all of these emotions. And I can imagine when you leave, you're euphoric. It's like ganja.
Mm.
You're euphoric.
Mm.
And so, and the thing about humanism is it doesn't have that. I mean, if you've ever been to even just an ordinary church, I mean, if you think of gospel churches, think of Pentecostal, when you're there and you're singing and everyone's there and they're jumping and everything, you come out, you're this high. Humanism, we sit down, then we talk logically like you and I have done today. You know, there's no euphoria, we don't even sing a hymn. We don't even have any kind of rituals. We don't have any of those things that bring us together, the kind
Mm.
of things that we can all do. Religion has that. And when we're all doing the same thing, it's comforting and you don't have to think about it. You've got a book that tells you
Mm.
exactly what you need to do, which is what I was saying. It was freeing not to have to follow that book.
Mm.
But when you've got a book and you don't have to think about it, it tells you and you don't even have to read it. You can just go to church and the pastor will tell you what's in there and tell you
Mm.
what it means. And all you have to do is say amen
Mm.
if you're in a Christian church. If you're in if you're in a madrasa, if you're in a school, or if you're in, all you have to do, everybody's doing the same thing. And that idea of ritual where everybody does the same thing, it's comforting. And I think the
Mm.
thing we miss with religion isn't about the teachings, it's about the coming together, it's about the ritual, it's about
Mm.
everybody being on the same page. And that's hard to break away from. Sunday morning, as I said, Old Kent Road, everybody's there doing the same thing, everybody's dressed to the nines. It's a club, it's part of this whole
Mm.
identity thing. And when you fly from Nigeria and you come in, you can walk into a place and you know exactly where you are, you know exactly what
Mm.
to do. And I think that's one of the things, the identity problem that humanism has. If you're leaving Pentecostalism and then you turn up to a meeting and you're sitting down and it's a group of middle-aged white people talking about, assisted dying, it doesn't have the same buzz. It doesn't.
Yeah,
And so, you
yeah.
know,
I
sorry, I
suppose,
don't,
yeah.
but yeah, that's the kind of thing we're struggling. So when we're looking at,
Mm.
we apply logic, but that logic is logic. But what humanism doesn't do so well is deal with the intangible things, the emotion. I mean, as human beings, we are emotional and we don't evoke that so that when someone, it's a bit like a cheap watch, gold watch that's shiny and buzzy, even though we know it's cheap, it's £5, but it's got, it's shiny and it holds our attention. Whereas if we had a proper watch, but it's got a plain strap and it just had the numbers on it. It's a watch, it does the same function, but the glittery one with all the little diamonds around it that's only gonna, that but bends
Mm.
and it's supposed to be gold, but it isn't. It's still it holds our attention.
Mm.
And that's where humanism falls down. We don't have that.
Cool.
And do we adopt it? Do we adopt that? Do we want to be jumping around?
Mm.
We're not going to get that in European humanism. We may get it in African humanism, where we may find songs and American, where we got that history of gospel, that history
Mm.
of what it means to come together in that joyous way. We may find it when we have our conferences, we play music. When you go to a European conference, you go in, you sit down, you listen, you leave. You may get a sandwich, you may get a sausage roll, you may get something. We cook food, we come together, we have rice and curry and all kinds of things. And people come and they go, really? We're eating all, oh, we don't usually do this. We haven't worked out
Cool.
how to be celebratory of ourselves as
Mm.
human beings. And I think that's where, when we're looking at the crossover, why Black people aren't in humanism, because culturally we're different. It represents the European way of doing things, which is very staid, very serene, quiet and all of that. Whereas
Mm.
we, even if we took away Pentecostalism, African religion, the old African religions, was about jumping, was about noise, it was about all of those
Mm.
things. And if you're coming from the Caribbean, you've got calypso, you've got reggae, you've got people jumping up and down. How are you going to again translate that? Because when I go to a humanist conference, I'm like, it's, you know what I mean? They've got a choir, beautiful, beautiful voices. You know what I mean? It's not about them not being good at what they do, but it doesn't appeal, or it doesn't kind of join up with the other communities. If you think about, the Indian community, if you think about other communities and how they celebrate and what they do.
Well, that's it. Even with I've gone such a tangent here, but I've enjoyed it.
Sorry,
But
sorry.
but we can't use any of this. Pretty much like everything we talked about last half an hour has just been fun, really. But the other thing I said to is it, I think that with wedding as well. If you think of a humanist wedding, right? I know
Mm,
they can do it, but it's when I think of it, I think you think of like I'm not sure what a Christian wedding is. I know sorry, what a African Christian wedding would be like. I don't know how it would be different, but you think of like a Sikh wedding, right? Or at least for me, I've been to many. I mean, it is fun. Like, it is good. Would I really want a humanist wedding, even though I'm a humanist compared to a Sikh wedding? I
well,
don't know.
I used to be a humanist wedding celebrant.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know, I was reading that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I
So,
was
and
thinking, would that be a difficulty for the African, for the Caribbeans? And I'm thinking, when we go to a wedding, we have whatever, I don't know what the African Christian rituals are, but whatever they are, we go to a humanist one, oh, kind of lost that now. So even if they don't believe, they just want I just want to do it anyway, type thing. You know what I mean? That might be a challenge. I don't know how you'd get around that one, but yeah. So when you did your humanism weddings, did you have many black people at all? Or
there were a few. There were a few.
hmm,
I did a lesbian wedding, and one of the participants she was mixed race. I did
hmm,
another black couple, and it's always with all of the weddings, practically all of the weddings, it was trying to create a neutral space, because one side of the family would be religious, or there would be, the religious
hmm,
granny or the religious auntie or another side of the family. So when you're doing a humanist wedding, you have to create this neutral space that isn't,
hmm,
it's not just not religious, but you then have to find out how you incorporate not religion, but a sense of, we all different, how we're going to come together, how do we make this a space
hmm,
that's comfortable for everybody. So, and that doesn't allow for you kind of, because you're trying to balance it, you don't kind of have the kind of, because a lot of the rituals within other cultures are linked to religion.
Yeah.
So we had the loving cup, and one was a Scottish wedding. The family was Scottish. So they had the
Mm,
loving cup, and the loving cup is where everybody in the family takes the cup and drinks from the one cup. So to join in
mm,
two families. But it's the words that are said with that are very religious and very
mm,
God-based. So all of these rituals, because religion has taken over all of these rituals, if I was to do that as a humanist, I'd have to rewrite those words, which is fine. That isn't a problem. But what you end up having to do is unpick because people want familiarity as well. So a lot of times we'd say, do you want to say vows? And they go, yes, we want to write our vows. So want to do something else. So a couple of people did bindings. So you could do a binding, which is kind of Celtic or whatever, and beads. Some people did a bead, one person did a bead. But a lot of the time, the format is very much based on a Christian wedding
mm.
with just a few words changed. So even then, I was trying to encourage them. Kind of do something different. Do you want to, I had a whole list of things that you could do. And they were like, no, they want the familiar without the word of,
That's what the Irish guy said to me. He said to me, the trouble we have in Ireland is that um the kind of the Christian I think it'd be Catholics up there, wouldn't it? Catholics, I
yeah,
guess. Um, they would be like I can't remember the exact words he used. He said something along the lines of like I can't remember, you're just making a point that they're kind of a bit energetic, they kind of know what they're doing, they're carrying across, they're like they've got a spirit about them. I don't know how to explain it. But whereas the humanists, we don't have that yet, and we need to work on it because we can't attract people in the same way because we don't really. Where the Christians had their cross and they go down the streets and they're like, "This is what we do, and this is what we are," and like we're strong and like,
yeah.
yeah, and, it's like you said, it's fun. Whereas the humanists were kind of boring,
It
scientific,
is.
you know what I mean?
And again, because it's focused on that European way of doing things,
Mm,
and it's all very logical. And I think we what's missing from humanism is the emotion. But how do
mm,
you evoke emotion without being ritualistic, without being all of those things? And I think we shouldn't worry about that too much, but we need to come together and be joyous. So that's why we always used to have food and music. At the very least, we could have food and music as a
mm,
minimum to socialize. Whereas when you go to one of the other, you might have a bit of wine and, some biscuits and a cake that's bought from Mark's Waitrose, depending on where you are. Whereas we used to make food. I'd spend my mornings cooking up all kinds of things and giving out food. And I used to bake a cake every week, and we'd have a different cake to sit down and, and sometimes there'd be palm wine and things like that. Because we need to create that sense of collective.
mm.
And that's what's missing. Coming into a meeting, you go to any of the local groups, they come in, they have a speaker, meetings, they talk, they leave. They might go to the pub afterwards for a bit of a social. That's very European. But if you want to attract people from other communities, you have to look at how those communities go. And all other communities, I don't care where you come from, the social aspect of it is really as important. It's as important
Mm.
as not being a believer, of coming together with like-minded people. And humanism misses that mark every
I
single time.
I never actually thought about it until you mentioned it just
Mm,
now. It's actually I never really because that also goes back to why is humanism still so white majority. You've got all the fact that well we're just less religious, but even the ones who aren't religious, yeah, I think you're probably right. They're probably thinking we need something, you know what I mean, like social,
yeah.
yeah.
And even the
Anyway,
social stuff, Central London Humanists, oh, sorry, I'll go. Central London Humanists
yeah,
do museum walks and walking and all of those kinds of things. Again, they're fine, but they're not the kind of things that, melanated people do. But I'm going to let you go. It's been fantastic talking to you. I've been
yeah.
so warmed by this. Let me know if you want to come and present something to the group, just let me know. If
I
you,
did actually have one more question because that was this is my last
oh,
question I
go
was saying,
ahead.
and then
Yeah.
I promise you this is it. 'Cause I've kept you so long.
No, don't
Um,
worry.
anyway, yeah. So the first question is what I want to ask everyone: what is humanism? I mean, this last one again. It's not going to be
Mm,
in the article, but it's going to be in the big YouTube compilation. Um, so the question is, we're talking now in March 2025. What do you think is the immediate future of humanism? What are kind of the most important issues in humanism as of today? Um, yeah.
I think humanism needs to get more local. It needs to get more in tune with the community and what they want. I think we have these big overarching themes: assisted dying, faith schools. We have all of these things which are, important. But when we're looking at humanism, it should be about people. We've got a cost of living crisis. We've got all of these things that are going on. Where is humanism in that? Where is that voice? So if we want to have a future, we need to get local. We need to get grassroots. We need to get to where people are to say, this is what humanism is, but also what's going on with you. And how can I, as a humanist, as a human being, how can I help you? How can I support you? What do I need to do? And I
Mm.
think unless we're doing that, we're just going to be talking to the high flyers. We're just going to be perpetuating the same thing that we've always done. Yeah, that's where we need to do. We need to get grassroots. We need to get local so that we can then be out there and just living what it is to be a humanist and showing people what it is as I, as a humanist, are doing. What am I doing? How am I living my life? What does it mean to be a humanist? At the moment, we're too ethereal, we're too up there, and we need to be more local.